So thanks for joining. Thanks for joining on time. For this third presentation or third in a series on From Campus to Career. Today we'll be talking about the 5 work skills that no degree can replace. These are indispensable. They're actually very valuable, not just for your career, but for your own development, your own life. I think these are really important skills to have. So we're going to spend some time walking through these 5 work skills. And just to give you an overview of this series, we've had 2 sessions before. The first one was about 3 behaviors that you really need to have that's going to make you stand out. And the second in the series was about the 5 things you should not do in your new job. And today we're talking about skills, and these are fundamental skills. And I think these skills apply to everyone, not just to those who are looking for employment, but for absolutely everyone who wants to grow themselves and become a better version of themselves. So I just start by introducing myself. I'm Paul Korir, and I've been running this series of talks. But for the coming 3 talks, there will be different individuals who I think will have a lot of value to add, and I think it'll be great value for you if you're interested in attending. So I'll give you an overview of the talks that will be coming for the next month, September, October, and November. And I hope you could also inform your friends. These are great entry-level talks for you to set yourself up for a career. And as you start growing your skills and establishing yourself, they are indispensable things to be aware of. If I was aware of these while I was in my early years in my career, or even while I was still an undergraduate, I would have made a lot of different decisions. And my hope is that this series of talks can help you navigate your career moving forward so that you can be better prepared to succeed. That really is my goal. That they are designed to be free, and they're designed just to communicate to you things that I wish I knew while I was an undergraduate. So let's just start with an overview. I'll start by giving you an overview of why this series of talks, and in fact, sort of like a big picture of what the point of these talks is about. Then we're going to dive into the 5 skills, and then in the end, we're going to zoom out and try to figure out what do these 5 skills entail in a nutshell. What do they really entail? And then I'll tell you about the talks that are coming up. So once again, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you all here. So let's start by asking ourselves, why this series of talks? What's the point? What's the purpose behind this series of talks? And I like to think of everyone's development is exactly the same as a little tree or a sapling growing in a nursery, which hasn't yet built its roots, hasn't yet established itself, and is still very vulnerable. And the objective of this plant is ultimately it wants to establish itself, become a very important part of the ecosystem, become a home for birds, become a source of fruit, become a way of providing shade in the environment. But how does this growth and maturity actually happen? How do you move from being a sapling, very tender, very vulnerable, very dependent on care and nurturing around you, to become a powerful tree that is, very important in the environment? Like, how does this happen? And I think that it's actually a process of growth. It's something that you have to, you need a lot of support and mentorship. You can avoid a lot of problems and heartaches. And, and it takes a lot of things. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of skill, as we shall see today, require a lot of patience. Like, they only progress by a very tiny amount. And if you stop giving them attention, they fizzle out and die. When you see someone who's really developed themselves to a very high degree, it shows that they have a very high level of patience. Patience is really fundamental. Diligence, can you bring yourself back to the task every day or every other day? Can you sustain a continued attention to your learning process. That's really what diligence is. And of course, learning, we have no end to our capacity for learning. We have to learn new things every day. Right now, the kind of technology that's coming into the marketplace is changing how we do ordinary things, like how we write software or how we do our writing, how we do our reading. And it's challenging incumbents like big companies like Google on how made their offerings. We have to continually learn. And of course, we need to have humility, the attitude that we can always learn something, even from what seem like uneducated people. There's no limit or there's no restriction on where knowledge resides. And therefore, humility is such an important thing. There are many others. I could go into a lot of detail, but one of them, which I think is very important, and I want to just take a minute to talk about this, is luck. Now, I know may be wondering, okay, so if luck is just, happenstance or random, I have no control over that, right? That's not true. You can control luck. And by you attending a talk like this and listening to me, you're just increasing your level of luck because you'll be aware of things that you are not aware of before. Nobody has taken the time in the course of your undergraduate study or in your high school study or even in your familiar environment to tell you about some of the things I'm telling you today. And I've just been lucky that I had certain things in my environment that I have realized over time are so indispensable. And I want to share them with you. And by sharing them with you, by you hearing them, taking them to heart, putting them into practice, you raise your level of luck by the kind of books you read, by the kind of friends you have, by the kind of things you do, where you spend your time. Those things increase your level of luck. It doesn't guarantee, there's no guarantee at all, but you increase your level of luck. Luck is important. I really want to emphasize that. Luck is such an important part of your growth and maturity. And I would really urge you, look for opportunities where you can move yourself towards being more lucky. If there's an event where someone is talking about new kinds of technology or new ways to do things, attend that talk because it's just 1 hour and that could improve your luck, could give you an exposure to new opportunities you never had before. That's one big picture of why I'm running this series of talks. The second reality that we may not be aware of or is sort of tucked away and hidden in our own experience, the future is Africa. Africa has got the biggest number of youth, and that number is just growing. While other countries, their populations are actually plateauing or decreasing. So in 100 years, you may not be alive in 100 years, but in 100 years, your offspring will be alive and they'll be in a different world. They'll be in a world where almost half of the population of the world could be African. And therefore, we need these skills for that future. You need these skills to prepare yourself. You don't want to be competing with people who are freshly from undergraduate and you are 20 years into your career because you didn't take the time to learn some of these skills. So if it is true that the future is Africa, if it is true that your biggest competition will actually come from people who are not yet even born, then you need to prepare yourself to lead that generation. That's what I'm really trying to do here. So enough about this background. Why don't we get into talking about skills? And I thought it would be useful sort of to frame this conversation about skills by starting by referring to a book. It's a great book by a guy called Carl Newport. And he's written a book called So Good They Can't Ignore You. This is a great book. If there's one book I'd really encourage you to read, it's this book. What this book talks about is that you may have passion, you may have interests, you may have things that you really want to grow in, but if you don't have skills, you have no voice. Skills are the new currency. Skills are how you distinguish yourself. What I'll be talking about today are skills which are fundamental. They're sort of at the bottom. They're not even technical skills. These are fundamental skills. But those skills, those fundamental skills are the ones that really get you going. But a few things about skills that I really want to emphasize. Haba na haba hujaza kibaba, meaning that it's every little additional skill that you add to your collection of skills that advances you. That's really very important, number one. Number two is skills are grown slowly. Just like you cannot see when a plant is growing, it's exactly the same way with your skills. Your skills grow gradually. You have to tend them. You have to address them every single day. And if you can't get feedback and mentorship and guidance in building your skills, that can really take you further. So that's point number one about skills. Point number two about skills is once you acquire them, they're yours for life. Nobody can take them away from you. They are part and parcel of your being, just like riding a bicycle. If you ride a bicycle and you stay for 20 years without riding a bicycle, then the next time you get on a bicycle, you can very easily ride a bicycle because it's a skill that you've acquired. You've taught your body how to respond to how do you change of gravity whenever you're on a bicycle, and you're able to advance yourself, you're able to move forward. Maybe you wouldn't be as adept as you are 20 years before, but you still know how to ride a bicycle. You still have the confidence of riding a bicycle. So once you acquire skills, they are yours for life. And third, I think we've mentioned this in the diligence, is you have to be deliberate about them. One of the points that Carl Newport makes in his book is the idea of deliberate practice. And you cannot grow your skills without having a very sharp decision that you want to grow that particular skill. It doesn't come by practice. Just practice alone without being deliberate about what you're doing doesn't get you growth. And that's, I think, where having a mentor or an expert alongside you can really go a long way, because they can then correct you and help you in being very targeted. And you see this in many domains, whether it is in playing instruments and mastering an instrument, or playing chess, or learning a computer programming language, or working with AI. You have to be deliberate. It's not accidental. Excellence is a result of being very deliberate in your growth. And here's one of the most important things that you need to know. If you stop halfway, they fizzle out. Yes, it's true that once you acquire them, they're yours for life, but that is once you've completed the process of developing that skill. But if you stop halfway along the journey, before the skill has been cemented, then you lose it. It goes. You will not have it at all. And I can tell you, I've been training a couple of young people on typing, and I'll be talking about that soon. And at a certain point, one of them decided that they wanted to take a break, and they came back. They had lost their mojo in typing just because they took a break. And that's the effect of stopping halfway. You really have to take the journey all the way to the end. Now, let's start with our first skill. Now, I don't know what proportion of you have invested time in this. I'm sure all of you use computers because you are joining now from either computer or phone. But I really want to emphasize a certain number of details when it comes to typing and digital navigation. So here's the thing. If you are slow on your computer, then you will not be a good investment. It's plain and simple. And you have to be fast. You have to be quick when working with a computer. Why? Because you're competing with people in developing countries who have been working on computers, who've been typing from the time they were 5. So how do you stand out? You have to be at the same level. You probably may not get to that level you start right now, or maybe not be able to compete with them, but you can definitely make inroads towards that. Nobody wants a slow worker. Nobody wants someone who has to look at the keyboard every time, or who has to look up a menu or click on everything. That is not attractive in the workplace. For you to be attractive in the workplace, you must learn a couple of key skills. Why? Because we're living in a digital world now. every single job, every single experience that you have is built around digital experiences. Working on a computer, how you type, that is essential. If you are hunting for letters on your keyboard, you are wasting hours every week. Literally, you're wasting hours. And you need to learn to type without looking at your keyboard. You should be able to type in the dark without missing a letter, because you know where the keys are on the keyboard. The next thing that you need to know is how to work with keyboard shortcuts. If you've been avoiding keyboard shortcuts, and I know everybody knows copy and paste and cut, those are basic. But I'm talking about how you can navigate between windows without even using a mouse. Um, how you can uh, get screenshots without using your mouse, how you can open different applications, how you can launch applications from the command line. There are all these different skills that you can pick up. And there are tons of documents that can help you figure that out. Why is also this important? It's important because the vast majority of your colleagues and your classmates and your peers are not adept at this. And this is what's going to make you stand out. There's a story about one of the guys who works in government. He tells his story. He wrote an article about this, and I put this up online, that he got a job which then advanced him just because he was typing at 100 words per minute. And someone noticed him. Someone noticed how fast and efficient he was. And because of that, they said, I want to hire this guy just because he stood out. So it gives you a competitive edge. And it's so important in this day and age where digital is everything. Even though we live in a mobile first world, most of the websites these days are designed for mobile. You have apps on your phone. But the truth is, a lot of productive work is still done on personal computers, whether it's programming, whether it's writing, whether it's calls or interacting with others or doing graphics work. Computers are still the mainstay, and you need to master how to navigate. So this is just a snapshot of some of the shortcuts that are available on Windows. What proportion of this do you know? Are you able to navigate through Windows by quickly launching applications based on using these shortcuts? And so you're going to see this. This video is being recorded, so you can then later on pause the video at this point and look at these shortcuts. But I'll challenge you, can you master all of these? These are for Windows, but the same thing applies if you're working on a Mac, if you're working on Linux. There are shortcuts that are available. You need to master those shortcuts. They'll get you ahead of the game to make you more competitive. So let's think about practical takeaways. What can you do? Number one, learn touch typing. It takes you about 100 days to go from roughly 15 words a minute to about 50 words per minute. And once you get on the 50 words per minute, then the sky is the limit. I mean, you can go as far as you want to go by practicing very carefully. If you start today, 100 days from now, you can be doing 50 words a minute by touch typing. So it's accessible. Anyone can actually do it. Number two, as I said, master the basic OS operations, copying files, opening applications, using multiple desktops, being able to move things between desktops, how to minimize applications. If you can, find out about the command line, because that's a really powerful way, especially if you're in a technology field. You must master the command line. Master the keyboard shortcuts. We've talked about that. Every kind of tool that you use, whether it's for documents, for spreadsheets, for browsers, for coding editors, especially if you're working as a software developer, you need to have navigation of your IDE on your fingertips. Don't use the mouse. That's a waste of time. Every time you move your hands away from the mouse, you're going to lose a couple of seconds. And every second, every minute counts. Test yourself. Go to this website, 10fastfingers.com. That's what launched on the screen. 10fastfingers.com is a very quick way for you to measure your typing speed. And once you've figured out your typing speed, if you really want to learn, why don't you sign up at Typing Club? And it's got a whole progression of classes that can help you improve your typing speed all the way from beginning until you get to a really decent speed. It starts right from the beginning with one letter at a time until you're able to type even numbers and punctuation, capital letters, and so on. So these are the practical takeaways. Before I leave this story about typing, let me just show you an illustration. So these are two individuals that I was mentoring as part of an internship program. And what happened was I really emphasized the importance of them learning how to type. So D and J is what I call them for now. And it took them about, it's a 4-month internship. And as you can see from the graph, they progressively learn how to type. So by the end, D had got to about 50 words a minute, and J was just under 40 words a minute. But bear in mind, this is touch typing. And notice also they improved on their original typing speed. I could go into the story of why they have these funny shapes here at the beginning, but the moral of the story here is because they typed every day, you see they have a dot for every day, and because they were diligent at ensuring that they followed the typing club lessons, they ended up two things. One, faster than they started, and two, touch typing. Touch typing means that they can type with their eyes closed. They can type without looking just at the screen. They can type in the dark. So this is an important investment. It's going to serve you for the rest of your life because I don't think the keyboard is going away anytime soon. The next skill, which I think is so important, and it's easy to take this for granted, is critical reading and questioning. So reading and questioning go together. Whenever you read, you should always ask questions. Don't just take what you read for granted. Now, we live in a day and an age where we have ChatGPT and all these generative AI tools that make it easy for us to, get a lot of text, which we don't have to write ourselves. But here is the key point. What you get out from these tools is only as good as the quality of your questions. Like if your questions are basic, you only get basic output. But if you challenge it, you can actually challenge ChatGPT. You can actually push it by asking it really smart questions. But that means you are reading you are reading widely, you're reading around you, and you are questioning what you have. You're not just taking it for granted. It's not a passive act. We need to learn to read actively. Challenge the text. Anytime you read something, challenge the text. Look for gaps. What might they be missing? Try and extract insight. What is being said? What is a key point? If you read 5 pages and you've just been breezing along, like what was the key point that the author was making? And great professionals engage with content. They ask sharp questions. They don't just read passively. Why does this matter? It's because it'll help you spot flawed arguments. And now with a lot of these AI tools, there's a lot of fake content online. You want to question and challenge this content. You want to have deep opinions, not shallow opinions, not just regurgitating what other people have said. We want to have some depth to what you say. So that's why you read widely. You spread your mind as far as possible. It also improves your learning speed. If you have a good understanding based on what you've read before, then it means you can understand things much better because you have something to compare against. And that helps you move ahead of the competition. Here's a great book that I really want you, if you can find this book, please get this book, How to Read a Book. The author of this book, Mortimer J. Adler, and his co-author, Charles Van Doren, go into a lot of detail of the different types of reading. I'm going to show you that in the next slide. And how to approach a book. What should you have in mind? And the more you do this, of course, the better it will be for you. The more you repeat this process, then the better you become. You can actually pick a book and in 30 minutes, you can have gone through the book, not having read all the words, but having challenged and engaged the book and extracted as much as you can. So there are 4 levels of reading. This is what the author talks about. There's elementary reading where you're just reading the text, you're taking it as it is, and you really want to move away from this. You want to start being inspectional when you have a lot of material to read. You can skim through a 200-page book within a very short time by knowing how the writing is structured, and that's very important. There's analytical reading where you read back and forth, where you're not necessarily reading linearly from the beginning till the end, but you're looking for certain key ideas. And a lot of well-written stuff is structured. It has a rigid structure. And if you know that structure, you can then very quickly read it. So for example, reading academic articles, Academic articles always have the same structure. They have an introduction, they'll have a methods, materials and methods section, then they'll have a results section and a discussion section, not necessarily in that order. But once you know what the function of each of those components are, then you can actually directly go to the third paragraph of the introduction, go to the results section, go back to the methodology, and just keep jumping back and forth, which will be much faster than someone who's trying to linearly read from the beginning till the end. And then, of course, there is synoptical reading, where you're not just reading one book, you're reading several books. And you're reading these several books because you're looking for one idea, a single thread that runs through these books. You're trying to build a very clear picture in your mind across those books or articles. So, practical takeaways. After reading, ask yourself, what's the main idea? What am I missing? What would I ask the author? Very important. Summarize complex ideas or articles in your own words. How would you rephrase it? That's an excellent exercise to take. Try and read across fields. If you're an expert in one particular area, challenge yourself and try and read on something completely unknown to you. What ideas or what language or what concepts do they build in that other discipline that you may not be aware of? In what way can you bridge gaps between your domain and this new domain or these other domains that you'd love to get into? So here's a challenge I set for you. Find a recent academic article in an area of interest and give yourself 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, 2 weeks to go back and forth on that article and try and understand it thoroughly. I can assure you that that exercise, just like going to the gym and lifting weights, is going to really push your mind in terms of what you thought you knew and in terms of what you could know and what you could expand and learn more on. The third skill, which I think is so important and that you need to invest time in, is developing the ability to have clear writing. Why is clear writing important? Because there are tons of ideas that run through your mind, and you need a way to organize them. And if you spend time and invest time in learning how to sharpen your ideas, you can actually nurture some of these ideas and make something out of them. The truth of the matter is, writing and thinking are two sides of the same coin. Your ability to write is completely related to your clarity of thinking. If your thinking is muddied and confused, your writing will be muddied and confused. It doesn't matter how long you've practiced. What matters is the clarity of thinking. And clear thinking is gold in this day and age. People who can think clearly, people who can articulate their points very clearly. So writing is not just, we think of writing as a way of communicating, but actually writing is a way of organizing your thoughts. It's a thinking skill. It's only that it is manifested in terms of words. If you can't write clearly, it's a sign that your thinking is muddled and and confused, and you need to work on that. Why does that matter? It's because writing clearly creates opportunities for you. Why do you think that a lot of companies have a blog? A lot of startups have a blogging page. Why? It's because writing is a way for them to express themselves. And in the process of writing, you can also discover new opportunities. As you wade your way through your ideas, you might actually discover connections between seemingly disconnected ideas, while poor writing creates confusion and lost chances. Whatever role you get into, it's your writing that will allow you to be judged on. If you write clearly, if your emails are on point, easy to understand, not just expensive, then you will make great headway and great progress in your career. Here are practical takeaways. Try and write every day, even if it's like 10 sentences at the end of the day. That will advance you a lot. Write a blog and write summaries, write explanations of things that you're not clear about. If you read any Wikipedia article, you read something that you find is not clear, can you rewrite it in a way that would make sense to you? Practice structured writing. As I said, the whole idea behind structured writing is that each of the components of the structure has a role. And if you can learn to think in terms of having a structure to how you're presenting yourself, having a clear introduction. Why am I writing what I'm writing? And then going into writing what you'd like to write, and then explaining or summarizing what you've written. That will also advance you. So here's the thing. A couple of points. One, get a copy of Strunk and White. And I'm going to give you a QR code here. Strunk and White is a book that is very clear when it comes to identifying a set of rules that you can follow. It teaches you about structure, like what is a unit of composition? Like what is really the building blocks of good writing? You'll find all that within Strunk and White. And you can buy a copy of this. It's usually available. It's a little book, about 100 pages, but it's also available online. There are prior editions, which may be out of copyright, that are available for free online. And here's a challenge for you. Why don't you set yourself a task, and not a task to write for the rest of your life? That's probably not very practical, but can you write 3 articles, just 3, 1 a week, and pick a topic, whatever topic it is you want, just 3. 1 for this week, 1 for next week, and 1 for the week that follows. Just 3 articles, just that. You're not trying to write a book. You're just trying to write 3 articles, maybe 200 or 300 words. Just that. Just write 3 articles. That will get your juices flowing and start your movement in the right direction. The 4th skill, which I think is very important, is your numerical and logical reasoning skills. Now, I'm going to go into a bit of details about this, but essentially, are you comfortable around numbers? Now, I know someone who panics at the sight of numbers. And that just means that in terms of his career or the kind of things that he can do, he's limited. He's already cut off a huge part of what could be a huge opportunity for growth. Now, I'm not asking you to be a mathematician. Of course, if you are strong with numbers, then of course develop that skill as far as you can take it and try and expand it in new directions. But you just need to learn how to reason with numbers. If someone presents numbers, can you try and piece them together and make sense out of them so that you are not being hoodwinked? For example, if someone is showing a table with numbers and then there's a sum at the end, does that sum at the end actually come from the numbers which have been indicated on the other rows? And it doesn't mean that you have to add them in your mind, but can you sort of get an estimate of whether that number is in the right ballpark? Well, if you're multiplying 2 big numbers, let's say 57 and 180, can you multiply them in your head, not to actually get the answer, but to round them off? So 57 is roughly 60, 18 is roughly, 180 is roughly 200. So 200 times 60. So that's about what, 1, 2, and 3 zeros. So it's about 12,000. So you have a ballpark. You know that the number that you're going to get as a product will not be greater than the estimate you have in your mind. Being comfortable with numbers is so important. Every job in this day and age includes interpreting data. Whether you are in a legal profession, of course, if you're an accountant, you have to work with numbers. But if you are an engineer, obviously you'll work with numbers. But also if you're managing a call center, if you are writing software, you need to work with numbers all the time, and graphs and estimates and statistics. And these just have to be on your fingertips. So I've got on the screen a couple of graphs. You've probably come across all of these before. Some of them may be exotic. You've never come across them before. For example, box plots may be something that not everyone has seen. Scatter plots. Scatter plots, can you read a scatter plot and make sense out of it? For example, this scatter plot that we have on the screen, like, what does it tell us? To me, when I see this scatter plot, it carries no information because it has random points. So there really isn't anything. Whatever is on the x-axis has no relationship with the y-axis. There's almost no correlation. A heat map, what does a heat map tell you? Can you look at a heat map and make sense out of that? What about a network graph? Does that make sense to you? Can you then see, for example, what is the relationship between A and B? Does it mean you have to somehow connect through C and A, or through C and D? So A and B are sort of like connection points to between E and B. So you have multiple paths there. But the point is, can you look at graphs and numbers and make sense out of them? A lot of employers nowadays, they'd love to have people on their team who can work with numbers so that you can make data-driven decisions. We are in a data-driven world, and that's so important. What about logical reasoning? Being able to figure out if a certain idea follows from a set of antecedents. Can you logically reason to solve problems methodically instead of guessing? Can you go step by step? Here's some practical takeaways. Uh, you need to practice basic mental math. As I said, doesn't have to be exact, but can you get ballpark numbers so that you know that the final result will be around a particular range? Working with percentages, like if someone gives you, oh, we're going to increase our fee by 15 shillings, what does that mean? Is that a 20% increase? How does that then apply across the board? It means that your revenue would also have to go up by that 15%. What does that mean then in terms of your overall revenue? So being able to reason on your feet, learn how to interpret simple charts and tables and reports. Again, this is related even to your ability to read and question and solve logical puzzles. There are tons of games you can install on your phone that can help you do visual puzzles and make sense out of data or out of logical data. So that's very important practical takeaways. And the final skill, which is I think perhaps brings all these skills together, is being able to speak and listen. Now, the difference between speaking and listening and all these other skills that we've seen before is that speaking and listening skills are real-time skills. So right now I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking in real time. I'm not reading from a script. And if you had questions, if you raise questions, I have to learn to listen to your questions and understand what you're saying. That's in real time. While reading and writing skills, you can take as much time as you want to read, as much time as you want to write, as much time as you want to understand a graph. But speaking and listening are really where they all come together. Speaking and listening are really important skills because speaking is how you influence people, and listening is how you are influenced by understanding what they tell you. So they are indispensable skills. They are how you then can fit into a team, how you can then lead. Without these skills, you really can't lead a team. You really can't participate in a team. And a lot of things that need to be accomplished in the workplace cannot be done by a single individual. They need a team of people working together who are coordinated and paying attention to what they are saying, and your ability to communicate to them what is on your mind and what you're thinking is just as important. So why does this matter? A lot of people, and I've noticed this, is we don't tend to ask a lot of questions within our education setting. And if you are used to being quiet and being in the background, you become invisible. You become the kind of person who is easy to ignore. You could be then at risk of, if there's a downsizing happening in your company, and you'd be the first one to go because nobody knows what your contribution is, however brilliant or however smart you are. So this fear of speaking up, you have to overcome that. And hopefully by the end of this talk, we can get some questions from you because of you trying to speak up or you putting this into practice. On the flip side, there are people who speak too much and don't truly listen. So if speaking too little is a problem, speaking too much as well can be a big problem for yourself. So learning to just say what you need to say when you need to say it, but at the same time, not being too quiet so that you can avoiding opportunities even when you do have questions or things that you'd like to say. Here's a great book that I thought, if you can get a copy of this book by Mortimer J. Adler, again, same guy who wrote the book, How to Read a Book, How to Speak, How to Listen, is a great book. In fact, I'll tell you a little story. When I was in my first year of undergraduate, I remember I think it was one of the first classes we attended. We didn't have a lecturer in class, and we had to make a decision like who's going to be the class rep. And I had just read this book, and at some point in this book, the author talks about how to make a speech. So I was interested in becoming class rep, alongside with two other individuals. And so we were asked to make a campaign to stand in front of the class and explain why you should be a class rep. And I remember I was waiting outside for my turn to speak, and I went through this structure of how to structure a talk: ethos, pathos, logos, and I put that into practice. And the cool thing is that I actually got selected. In fact, I was elected with a landslide. I remember it's like 40 votes against like 10 votes or something like that. But that's because I had read this book, and 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 I knew how to be effective in communicating your idea. And it worked. It was surprising. It worked. And you see this with any great speech. Every great speech will always have a structure. It's not random. People don't just speak because they have good oratory skills, but because they speak with a structure. They have to establish themselves, first of all. They have to connect themselves with the topic. And then they present their ideas. They don't just run straight into their ideas. This book also talks about understanding your audience, and it gives an illustration from the play by William Shakespeare. There's a great speech that's made by Mark Antony, and later on but first of all by Brutus, and then by Mark Antony, and he uses that as an illustration of how each of them understood their audience. So, for example, Mark Antony comes to speak when Brutus has just said, "This is why we kill Caesar." So the crowd is angry, and Mark Antony stands up to speak. And when he speaks, he knows he's speaking to an audience of people who are angry. But by the end of that speech, the audience are looking for Brutus to kill him. And he uses these illustrations to really point out how to be influential. The author also talks about how to be fluent during a speech. How do you have notes alongside your presentation so that you can speak fluently and not keep rambling or be confused, and stick to the subject matter? Another thing is he talks about really how to master what it is that you want to talk about, and deciding on the level of detail. Some things are only mentioned at a very narrow level, and some other things you'd like to go into a lot more detail, depending on who your audience is and at how much time you have to speak. Here's some practical takeaways. Number one, practice speaking clearly. Be aware of the times when you say or nonsense words like or and you can practice in front of a mirror, practice recording it onto your phone, practice by just speaking to yourself as you walk, and just being aware of all these things. Listen to Barack Obama. Whenever he would give a speech, he would always pause at a certain point, and he wouldn't put in I mean, sometimes he would put those in, but he was very methodical in how he enunciated and he spoke his ideas. Rehearse your ideas out loud. Listen to yourself, because you may say something and it just sounds like rubbish, just because of how it comes across when you speak it out loud. On paper, it may be clear and simple, but when you speak it, it just sounds like a mouthful and becomes difficult to communicate. Develop active listening. Here's a simple trick you can apply. Whenever someone tells you something, paraphrase it, and to confirm that you understood what it is that they were saying. So those are the 5 skills that I mentioned. Number 1 was typing and navigating your computer. Number 2 was reading with questioning. Number 3 was writing clearly. Number 4 was being comfortable with numbers and graphs. And number 5 was speaking and listening skills. Now, if you were to sum up all these skills, I would summarize them as follows. These are skills of literacy, whether it is linguistic literacy or numerical literacy. And language is really important because language helps you think. We think and express ourselves using language, but it is through numbers that we see clearly. Numbers are measurements of things that are happening in the world. And if you can capture these numbers, if you can process these numbers, if you can be comfortable with these numbers, then you can actually see clearly. If you know what is our revenue, what has our revenue been, what are our projected revenues, that is a vision into the future. Numbers help you see clearly. So that's all that I had to talk about today. Coming up in September, in October, and November, we're going to have 3 talks. One is by a communications expert called Mercy Kinyoda, where she'll be talking about how to speak, how to talk, and drilling down into that last point about speaking. Even if you're still figuring it out, how to talk about what you do. And this is very important if you are you're looking for a job and you're looking for an opportunity to grow your career. And then in October, we're going to have a special talk. I'm looking forward to this, about understanding your personality. And your personality is really very important for you to position yourself in the right place. So once you understand the things that make you tick, the things that you are passionate about, then that can also help you try and find out what are the things available in the marketplace where I can best develop myself. But at the same time, being aware of what are my blind spots, what are the things that I need to grow in, and understanding your personality is very important for that. And then in November, we're going to have a specialist talk by a practitioner, My Journey in Software Engineering by Samuel Ungati. So that's all that I had. If you have any questions, I'd love if we could maybe have a sort of question and answer session, or if you have any comments or any contributions, now is the time to talk.